Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, HOA towed my truck and crushed it. I almost bankrupted the HOA in return. TLDR. HOA has my truck I am restoring towed off my property. I got it back only for them to tow it again a few days later and have it crushed. I wanted revenge and got about 20 trucks that were beyond repair and lined the street with them. I destroyed all contact points for the tow truck, so they needed to hire a special one for more money. At the end, the HOA barely had any money left and were desperately trying to avoid going bankrupt. Maybe next time they will leave a guy alone with his hobby instead of trying to micromanage the entire neighborhood and everyone that lives in it. I have read plenty of stories on here about the HOA abusing rules, making up rules, and even just totally ignoring rules. This story is a little bit different because it isn't about me fighting them on their bylaws. Instead, it is about how they messed with me and soon found out that it was the worst decision of their life. Now if you want to know what they hated so badly to start an entire war over, it was just a single solitary truck. Seems totally harmless, I know, but they had a certain idea of how a neighborhood would look, so my hobby of fixing up old trucks and cars seemed to just be too dirty for them. There was no rule against it though, so too bad, so sad for them, right? Wrong. They thought taking matters into their own hands using the HOA funds would be a smart move. Now before you think that my yard is full of car parts and half-broken scrapes, let me give you a picture. My hobby is repairing these trucks, but I have a strict internal rule of only doing one at a time. Otherwise, I know that I will get myself confused and probably take on more than I can handle. I use my garage for all of my work, and everything is stored in there. The only time that the truck leaves the garage is at night when I switch it out to put my everyday car in it. All the parts, tools, etc. those stay inside of the house. The truck sits in the driveway until morning, where I swap it back into the garage again. Probably one of the neatest setups for people that repair old cars. I have limited space though, and I respect the fact that it would look really crappy if my small yard was just full of junk. Still, it being out at night just wasn't good enough for them and they wanted that old truck gone. This was from the 50s and I had been spending months trying to get it up and running again. It was a challenge, and I was loving every minute of it. When I came outside to see that it was just gone, my eyes almost bugged out of my face because I thought it was stolen. I was going to call the police when I noticed in my mailbox was a letter from the HOA talking about them having an unusual and suspicious vehicle towed off my property. They had a number and I called them right away to give them a piece of my mind. Even if they didn't know the truck was mine, which they did, they had no right to just remove it off my property. I called them, and they acted all shocked and sorry about the error, and I was able to get my truck back in mostly the same condition as I left it. I was angry, but I knew there wasn't much I could do about it, so I let it go. Lo and behold, a few days later it was missing yet again, and I called the HOA and the tow company again. This time though, they admitted that the HOA told them the truck needed being crushed urgently and even got paid extra to do it as a rush job. The truck had only been towed away about an hour and a half before. It was clear they wanted the truck gone for good this time. What they didn't know was that by destroying it they made a huge enemy out of me. I wasn't going to just sit and take this, and instead I was going to fight them back. I was going to hit them where it would hurt them the most, their wallets. I called up everyone I knew that fixed trucks and asked them if they had any trucks that they gave up on and were not fixable. I didn't tell them why, because I didn't want them to get in any trouble, but at the end I had about 20 trucks at my disposal. The great thing about where I live is that there is no street parking allowed overnight, so when everyone goes to bed the streets are nice and empty. I spent hours placing all of the trucks along the street, so now it would really be a bother. That wasn't enough for me though, and I took a blowtorch at every single one and burned all the easy contact points for a tow truck to move it. Now only a special kind of tow truck would be able to be used to get rid of them, and I know for a fact those cost a lot more money for the person paying for the towing. Nobody knew it was me, and I went back home to wait until the panic that would ensue come morning. Of course, nobody on the block liked what was in front of their house, and they were all calling the HOA and complaining that they better get these trucks off of the street. No HOA wants an angry mob coming after them, and they quickly called the tow company to get it taken care of. Like I said before, they needed to use a special truck and they only had one of them, so it took many trips for all of the trucks to be towed away from the block. Each one costing a ton of money that I don't have the exact numbers on, unfortunately. This revenge was so sweet, and the best part was the HOA obviously knew it was me, but they had no proof and couldn't really do anything about it. Even if they knew it was me, the worst they could do is give me a fine and try to push the cost of towing on me. Without proof like the trucks having a license plate registered to me, it was their responsibility to pay for it. Even though I didn't know the exact cost of things, I knew that they were in trouble once they started asking people for donations and trying to set up fundraisers to get more money. They tried to vote to raise HOA fees, but that got rejected and they can't even try again for another year. It was clear that they were close to total bankruptcy from having to tow all of those trucks. They hated me for it, but they were the ones that started it by having my 1954 truck crushed instead of just letting me work on restoring it. This is basically the end of the story, but there is one last thing that I find too interesting not to share. Once the HOA didn't have money anymore, it was very clear that certain houses suddenly started living a little bit more within their means. To put it bluntly, the people on the board of the HOA seemed to have been skimming money off the top, and once they lost all that money, they couldn't really do that anymore. This is only my observation and I have no actual evidence that they were doing this. It could have just been the most perfectly timed coincidence ever. As for me, I got another truck in my garage that I'm working on and have a feeling they aren't going to try and tow this one if they don't want to lose the rest of their money. The next story is titled, "Car Dealer Tells Me I Should Waste My Time and Go to a Competing Dealer Because They Also Won't Give Me the Price They List on Their Website." TLDR. Car dealer treats me poorly and won't honor the price they list for a car. Tells me that I should waste my time and go to a competing dealer in the area because they also won't honor the price they list for the car. But the competing dealer does honor the price and I get a fine new car at a very nice price. This is a rather long, detailed story, so if you're the impatient sort, please skip to the bottom. Though note you're missing out on fun details. This took place 8 years ago when I was buying my first new car, not just a new-to-me car. I spent a good amount of time researching the options available, both in terms of other models from other manufacturers and option packages on the car in which I was most interested, so I knew exactly what I wanted coming in the door. In 2014, car dealer websites hadn't quite gotten to the level of borderline bait and switch trickery you see these days, so if a dealer's website said they had a particular car on the lot at a particular price, they almost certainly did. There were several in the region that matched what I was looking for, one specifically at my existing dealership. This wasn't a smaller dealership, it was one of the largest in the Northern Virginia area for this particular brand. I had had a reasonably good experience with their service department overall and figured I'd give their sales department a chance to shine. That was my first mistake. I showed up on a Wednesday after work. It was early June, so with the mercury being in the upper 90s, I was dressed in a comfortable, but still very presentable combination of a polo shirt and khaki shorts. When I entered the sales side of the dealership, I could see what appeared to be all the salespeople in a conference room laughing and joking while taking scissors to the tie of one of the men present. Later, I found out that was a rite of passage after making your first sale. I waited around for a minute or two as the conference room had glass walls and it would be impossible not to notice me as I'm not exactly a small fellow at 6 feet, 6 inches tall. When no one came out to greet me, I went up to the receptionist's desk and said, "Hi, I'm interested in model of car, and there's one in stock I'd like to see." Her response, without even looking up from her phone, was, "Okay." I stood there for another 20 seconds or so and then politely asked, "Would someone be able to show me that car?" This finally prompted her to look up from her phone. She looked me up and down, scoffed a bit, and said she'd go and get someone. I was willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, hoping that things would turn around. That was my second mistake. The receptionist came back with what looked like the youngest, most wet behind the ears salesperson she could find, as evidently, I wasn't worth the time of the more experienced folks. I explained that I was interested in a car that their website said they had in stock and provided him with the printout, showing the stock number, price, and all other pertinent details. It took him a while to find the car on the lot, but after a brief test drive I knew it was what I wanted and began the sales process. I had a trade-in, which had been primarily serviced by them and for which I already had a written offer from CarMax, so I knew how much I should receive for it. He quoted me just over half of that figure. When I pointed out that I could get several thousand more by taking it to the CarMax just up the road and had a written offer from them for that specific amount, he went and got his sales manager, who offered to drive me there and pick me up afterwards, but that they wouldn't match what CarMax offered. I was a bit surprised that they didn't want a nice used car to sell for themselves, 6 years old, top of the line, reasonable mileage, and serviced by them specifically, but again, cut them more slack than they deserved. When we got to price, things really fell apart. He quoted me a price that was several $1,000s higher than what they displayed on their website. When I showed him the printout again with the noticeably lower price, he looked to the sales manager for guidance. The sales manager immediately took the line that the price listed includes all available rebates and special offers and you may not qualify for all of them. I was now frustrated and showed them printouts from the other dealers in the area that had a similar price shown and said that if they weren't willing to honor the price listed on their website, I'd just go to the next closest dealer that had that model in stock at that price. His response sealed the deal for me. Go ahead, waste your time and go to competing dealership. We won't hold it against you when you come back here. I told them, okay, thank you for your time. I'll go to competing dealership, and got up to leave. No one stopped me and the receptionist said nothing as I walked past her out to the parking lot to drive to the other dealership. When I got to the competing dealership, it was already around 8 p.m. as I had spent a fair amount of time at the first dealership, and Northern Virginia traffic has never been known for being reasonable. I had a salesperson approach me immediately upon entering the dealership and I explained, I've just come from first dealership and want to buy particular model of car. Both of you have that car in stock with the options I want. They wouldn't give it to me at the price shown on their website. If you will, I'm ready to sign on the dotted line right now. The salesperson immediately took me to his office, verified that they had the car and confirmed that yes, the price on their website was accurate and I could walk out the door with that price. We started the process, and when we got to the trade-in, I further explained how the other dealership tried to lowball me on the trade. He said if I could produce a written offer from CarMax for the price I mentioned, they would match it. I gave him that paperwork and without any further discussion he agreed they would match that, and we moved on to financing. I hadn't gotten this far with the other dealer, but I had already lined up financing through my credit union. He asked if I'd be willing to see if his F&I guy could match or beat that figure. I agreed to let him try, and he came back with a rate that was 50 bits per second lower. Needless to say, I was already very happy with these people, but that definitely sealed the deal. Right as I was finishing the paperwork, the salesperson from the first dealer texted me to ask if they would give me the car at that price. I responded back that they would, and I was finishing up the paperwork at that very moment. He immediately tried to call me, then texted me saying he'd give it to me for $500 less. I responded to his text stating that I'd already signed the paperwork and he had lost the sale. Once the paperwork was complete, the exceptionally pleasant and helpful salesperson at my new dealership spent an additional half hour after the dealership had closed for the night running me through some of the features of the car and showing me how the infotainment system worked. This was completely above and beyond what I expected, as I thought I'd just be reading the 300-page user manual to figure it out on my own. I drove home that night with my shiny new car, a very happy camper. The next day I decided to rub a little salt in the wounds of the first dealership, so I drove there straight from the office. For context, I work in the banking industry and at that point it was still very much business formal dress. I showed up in my suit with my briefcase and had people falling all over themselves trying to help me, including the receptionist who clearly remembered who I was midway through me asking for the particular salesperson I dealt with the prior day. She offered me a seat and asked if I wanted some coffee while she went to get him, and I politely said, "No, thank you. I won't be here long." She somewhat quietly, sheepishly responded that she'd be back with that salesperson very shortly. There was a couple in the waiting area who seemed a bit displeased that they'd been waiting for a salesperson, but I got one the moment I walked in the door. No more than a minute later, the salesperson and his manager came out. The salesperson recognized me and with a look of defeat on his face shook my hand and asked how I was today. Before I had a chance to respond, the sales manager spoke up to introduce himself as if I hadn't spent an hour and a half with him the previous day. After I reminded him that I was there yesterday, and he had said it would be a waste of time to go the competing dealer because they'd never give me the car I wanted at the price shown on their website, his demeanor very quickly pivoted back to the snotty, insolent person I dealt with the previous day. He proceeded to ask, "Well, did they?" with a bit of a sneer. I said nothing but turned to the side and clicked the remote for my new car so the horn would give a few chirps. He said, "Good for you," in a rather curt tone and walked away, leaving the poor salesperson on his own. I shook that salesperson's hand, thanked him for his time, and turned around to leave. The receptionist spoke up as I walked past her and asked in a rather chipper voice if I needed any further assistance. I politely responded that no, the other dealership had provided me exactly what I needed, and I was all set. To make things just that little bit better, as I passed the couple sitting in the waiting area, I saw them exchange looks with each other that seemed to say, "Perhaps we should go to the dealer I mentioned." I said nothing further and walked out of the building wearing the smile of a winner. Thank you for listening.